Hey there, we're in Arizona, Phoenix. This is the Scott Guthrie event that happens apparently every year since the beginning of time, since the dinosaurs roamed.
He's older than you think.
He's really old, actually. He's a vampire, but don't tell anybody.
Yeah, oh yeah. T-Rex.net.
T-Rex. I gotta go see if that's available now, just so I can use that. So I'm here with my good friend Jerry Nixon, right?
Jerry Nixon,
attorney at law.
Attorney at law. That's only my side job.
Oh, of course, of course. So tell us, you're from Colorado. You came all the way to Arizona. What are you talking about?
All the way.
Yeah,
$75 plane ticket. Isn't that crazy?
That's amazing.
I know, it blows my mind. It blows my mind.
So what are you here to
talk about? .NET Core.
Okay, so I started playing with .NET Core probably a year or so ago when it was kind of in its...
Yeah, that was when it was born, basically.
Tell me, like, it was a painful experience for me originally. Tell me how it's getting better.
Terrific.
Don't mind me. I'm just going to fix this.
Am I not on?
No, you're good.
I am on.
Oh,
right.
This is... Like, I'm so awkward.
Start over?
Let's hold that. Let's just hold it.
Just hold it. Yeah, just hold it. There you, okay, well, just put it right there.
Is that a wrong place to have it?
No, I think there's some interference coming out from that end.
I'll put it here with my pistol.
Like, I don't, like, are you emitting some kind of radiation or something?
I've done it before. I'm not afraid to do it again.
Is that better? Audio's better. Okay.
All
so
right.
.NET Core, like it was a little bit of an experience early on. Tell me how it's getting better. Apparently, there's a release today
Today's the big day.
Okay. Tell me about it.
Of course, Visual Studio is still on release candidate. We're in release 3 right now. The .NET Core, and so that's what we're announcing today. And it brings more functionality into the IDE experience, so developers who want to use Visual Studio have a lot more tooling. One of the cool things that they added was the ability to edit the CS proj file, which is a big deal because the CS proj file is changing in spec.
Right.
Because we're doing this, you know, project.json was originally how we were going to set up all the dependencies for your project.
Right.
And then we'd go through and create a project.json lock file that would be your full dependency graph. That was good, except for it turned out it just didn't scale properly for every single project type. We wanted ubiquity across all the project types. We're working our way back now to CS proj. It's almost back to where we started in a way.
Well, what's cool is that though there is a difference in that. Remember back in CS proj it had a listing of all of your files.
Yeah.
Now there's a way that just says just include stuff in all this directory, which is super nice.
You could say file new project now to a .NET Core console application, and it's like an eight lines. It's incredible, actually, how terse it is. In fact, it's not I want all these files star.star. It's just all the files come, you like it or not. If you're going to mention a file in your CS proj, you're really mentioning it to ignore it.
I see. So the cool thing is that .NET has been pretty stable for a while. It's a tooling that's sort of getting better and evolving. Because you got to make the foundation first before you can make the tooling. Is that a fair assessment? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the framework itself is also evolving, right? It's the number of namespaces that are included in .NET Core was pretty small probably when you were playing with it originally. Man, is it a lot bigger now. It's to the point where you got to work hard to find something that you want and is not already there, especially for .NET developers who are already accustomed to just building to a framework that gives you everything you ever need, right? It's just such a luxury to go to .NET Core and you're like, oh, where's this thing I love? Those days are kind of behind us. We've just worked really hard to make sure that the entire framework is referenced. It's not the entire framework, but especially stuff that's like Windows specific, that's not there.
Right.
But overall, the framework that you know and love, all the BCL, all those helper methods and interfaces, they're all sitting there waiting for you to use.
So give me a preview of sort of what you're talking about today, and maybe just a little preview because obviously it's going to be live a little bit later on today. But for someone that's interested in looking at .NET, what do they do to get started?
This is my talk right now. I'm giving you my talk.
This is so good. It's like live talk. I feel it coming at me.
Right now, I'm doing the demo. You just can't see the screen.
Right.
Don't share the screen. That way it'll be a surprise.
Right, there is no screen.
Yeah.
So tell us about,
Smoke
like,
mirrors.
if you want to get started using .NET, obviously the first thing is that anyone can use it now, right?
Yeah, and probably the best way to say is now you can install just the SDK without Visual Studio. You can do it all from command line. And honestly, it's insane. You can say, so .NET is the driver, right? So .NET space whatever, kind of like Node.js development, right? You can say Node space whatever. And so I can say .NET space new, and I get all my, it's just like file new project inside Visual Studio, and I get all my project files, both of them. There's only 2 now.
Right.
And then I can say, I can say restore. It goes to all the dependencies that are listed in CS proj, pulls all of those beauty things down, and it's all ready to go. I can build it, run it, and do all kinds of stuff there. And if I don't want to have Visual Studio, or I'm on Linux doing all this, or I'm on a Mac doing all this, because that's kind of the idea around .NET Core that is cross-platform, is now I can open up Visual Studio Code or whatever my favorite editor is and go from there. So it's pretty sweet. When I finally deploy whatever it is I've built inside .NET Core, then it's different from the experience of a normal developer who builds with .NET Desktop, because that doesn't have a side-by-side experience where I can say, here's this, here's this, here's this, and I don't care what you have installed, I can run with whatever framework I'm identifying with. That's because in .NET Core, I'm really shipping the framework with me, right?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so I have 3 different applications. Each runs on a different version of .NET Core. No big deal. Each one of them has their own little containers inside them that hold.
And that's super nice because before I would have to be like, do you have the framework 3.5 installed? And I'd have to have this binary that they would install. And then if it was the wrong version of 3.5, your other app wouldn't work. Yeah. So now it actually all ships together. But does that create a really big footprint?
Well, it does and it doesn't, right? It's pretty small to start with because that's the point of .NET Core. Sure. And this is not what we have today, but this is where we're headed, where we can see, one of the things we did to make all this even possible is we took the entire .NET framework and broke out each of the namespaces into different individual NuGet packages, right? So you bring it down, all these little pieces. And so we're moving towards the world where we're going to be able to pick and choose based on just the dependency graph and the way you're using your code to say, yes, this is the framework, but this is all that we need. And now your footprint gets absolutely tiny because of that. Today where we are, we already have this small little thing. When you look at the footprint as far as size, it's teeny tiny. But when you think about things like microservices and containers, you want things to be super lean. It's neat that we're headed that way so we can make them even smaller and smaller and smaller.
So let me see if I understand. There's this sort of the base that we have, and then there's all these other libraries that used to be considered part of the base, but you just NuGet down?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And it's all behind the scenes. Developers don't even know what's happening. They just say reference to the .NET framework, and it all happens behind the scenes for them. And then I have 2 ways to deploy it. I can do it where, let's say you're an application and I'm an application, and we both use the same framework. We actually share it, right? And so then all of these applications could be very small because they share reused code, or not reused code, but share the frameworks. Or we can do it individually where it's like a standalone app where I have everything with me. And we also have now the ability that I can compile, I'm writing it all in C# and I can compile using the same C++ optimizer that C++ developers have, right down to the metal, shipping it with a garbage collection, type safety, and all the stuff that .NET developers love and know. They don't even know they don't have a runtime under it. It's just this tiny little side-by-side runtime.
So here's another question, and I have some confusion, maybe some of the viewers do as well. Like we talk about the .NET framework, and I understand that. We talk about the versions of the .NET framework, I understand that. We talk about tooling that works for .NET framework, I understand that. But then there's an additional concept of net standard. So how does that sort of work with all of those other parts? Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So they're 2 different things, but they certainly are tightly related, right? And so it's probably easier if we step back to PCLs.
Let's do it.
So there was a day when I would write for desktop and I would write for, let's say, Windows Phone. And the overlap was a Venn diagram. And inside that overlap, that represented a PCL type, right? And so then I would have another one. I want to also write for Windows 10 UWP, right? And so that's another that or Windows 8, right? And I'll bring that in. And now I have this Venn diagram, and it's much smaller because it's the lowest common denominator. It's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And what happens is I just want to generate. I can use software to figure this out, right? What's all the shared components between all of these different platforms? And it's this tiny little thing. That's the way PCLs went. And the more things I would add, the tinier and tinier and tinier it got.
I remember that. Like I checked everything, and then it would say you can't do that because like the Venn diagram was disappeared.
Right. 2 string is gone. You're like, what just happened? And so that was the problem. So what if we did it the opposite? What if instead we said, this is what we called all the interfaces that are important, and we're going to call it .NET Standard. Let's just say it's version 1 for now, right? And if you're going to qualify for this, then you have to include all of these things. So, well, who does qualify? Every platform turns out qualifies for that. Great. Let's go to 1.1. We're going to add a couple really important interfaces. Who qualifies now? This one doesn't anymore. Let's say .NET Desktop doesn't anymore, but it will in the next rev. And so now the rev can say, yeah, we're .NET 4.6.7, let's say, but we're also .NET Standard 1.1 because now we comply with all the different interfaces that are identified there. So it's not anything special other than a standard that says who qualifies here. If you're going to write to these interfaces, if you're going to write to this API surface, then which ones can you use? Well, you can use .NET 4.6 or 4. Whatever it is that qualifies for it. And so then even .NET Core, as it starts to rev, will say, okay, this is .NET Core version 2, but it's .NET Standard 1.1. right? We finally made it, so we qualify as 1.1.
I see. So instead, before with the PCLs, with the pickles, as Miguel likes to call them, it was more of a whatever is there, that's what we'll call it. So those are the profile numbers, for example.
Yeah.
But it was more of just an engineering side effect. Now it's more of a prescriptive, this is what the standard is. You either are in it or you aren't, right? And so you actually publish this, and now people can sort of say,
That's
now,
right.
okay.
And you can do it ahead of time, too, right? You don't have to wait to say, okay, all these platforms are there. What is the smallest common denominator? Instead, you say, what do we want this standard to be? Who qualifies, right? So you push the standard rather than react to whatever it is that is actually included in the platform.
And so if someone says, hey, we want to make sure the interface IFU is in there, that can be in RevNet Standard 2.5, for example. And then people, they're sort of writing it, she might say, okay, now we need to go to the standard, then she would add it, and IFU is in there, now it's Net Standard 2.5.
That's right, and every different permutation of the framework has a goal to be part of the standard now. So I'll have the next version of .NET Core, and it'll say, well, we want to be in the standard, what is it, .NET Standard Library, NSL? Am I getting that right? I'm getting it right, NSL.
Standard, yeah.
So they want to be that standard, whatever it is. Well, we can't release until we get that, so we got to add .2 string, so that way we at least get it, right?
Or IFU,
I think
which
everybody.
is in 2.5.
Yeah, IFU. I think that's a future version.
Yeah, maybe that's.
We have iBar, but IFU, how hard it is.
It's hard to get that stuff in. So I think now that we've talked about Net Standard, it's a really good transition to go into UWP because it is also .NET and also
.NET Core.
.NET Core, and it also works in Net Standard, right? It has a version. Why don't you tell us about sort of the opportunities for people that want to write for UWP and what it is and why they would use it?
Well, just like we can see that .NET Core applications now can be compiled down to the metal using .NET Native, UWP can do the exact same thing. So I can write an application. I can write an application in WPF, but I'm always going to have. It's not bloat. It's just the reality of memory space and the interception of the runtime. I'm always going to have that. And so now in UWP, I can write it, compile it all the way down to the metal, and get performance like crazy. It's really, really nice. And so really it's the startup time inside UWP is what developers now have, right? So I'm familiar with WPF. How do I move over into the Windows 10 world? And so we have a lot of different templates. Like I'm the author of template 10, and so that's a set of templates just to get you started, right? Because every developer writes the same boilerplate code. What if it was already written for you, right? That's the idea. And so there's a lot of value there. UWP really was one of the original, it was built and baked into .NET Core too, so it's pretty sweet.
So let's talk about sort of someone has a WPF app or they have a legacy WinForms app, for example, which people still write.
Oh yeah.
What is their migration?
People totally still write.
Yeah. What is the migration path to UWP? And then what are some reasons that you would say as a dev, like, yeah, I should totally move to UWP? So let's start with the migration path and then the reasons why you should consider moving.
Yeah, well, let's go back to should you even move to, right? So who wouldn't do it? Well, I just spent the last 3 years and $6 million with my entire team to build this line of business application. Should I go ahead and move that over to a UWP application because we just finished it? Right? Of course not. But what can I do? Because there are a lot of value. There's a lot of value in UWP. Not just stuff like live tiles, which is sweet and great, but but other stuff, especially the store. I can have all these new deployment and licensing options. So now I can take my WPF application, wrap it. We call it Project Centennial. I'm wrapping it in UWP, still using all the mechanisms of the store. So I don't have to build out this incredible infrastructure in order just to deploy applications to my enterprise, or as a developer, deploy to multiple enterprises. And it's all set up now. It used to be just the Windows Store, and there were a lot of gaps. Now we have the Windows Store for Business, and it's secure between individual organizations. You don't mistakenly put it in the store, and now it's public for everybody. That's not what's going on anymore. Now we have Windows Store for Business, same infrastructure as Windows Store, just locked down for just enterprises.
So one of the benefits that I'm hearing is that the store provides a lot of benefits for deploying and for getting the application out in sort of a really standard, rugged way.
Yeah, and handling licensing and uninstalling later. I mean, it's really great. I mean, who has a perfect install, uninstall story? Really only the store. Yeah, everything else is monkeying with your registry. I mean, this is almost like an Xcopy deploy.
I love it. So the store is an obvious benefit, and for those that want to get into it, tell me more about Project Centennial and how one would use that to move over.
Okay, sure, yeah. If I have, let's say I have a WPF app and it's finished and ready, and I already have, install shield or an MSI or whatever it is that installs it. So I can we have a converter that's basically a listener. It's kind of like what FileMon does, honestly. And you execute your installer, everything installs. It watches and sees everything that you just did so that it can now put you in a container and it can fake all of that for you when you do the real install. You then take your WPF application, bundle it with a UWP application, and when you go through the install process, your WPF app doesn't know any better. All the registry markings, all the files, wherever they were, it thinks that they're there, right? Because they're all virtualized for it. And so you get this great experience on the desktop. If you're an IT pro, this is like a dream come true, to be honest, because I'm installing your application and it's writing to the registry, but it never writes to the registry. Everything's virtualized. I need to uninstall, and I just uninstall it. I don't have to go clean up the registry and worry there was a problem. That's what Centennial gives me.
And that's interesting because, I mean, there's some, there's never like a clean uninstall. There comes a point in time when a dev has installed and uninstalled things so many times, it's like, I just need to flatten my machine because there's just junk
Oh,
everywhere.
that's right.
There's
it's
junk
PC
everywhere.
rot, right?
Yeah, junk everywhere. And you're saying with sort of Centennial, there is like this layer where these calls are made to make those file changes.
They're all virtualized. They think they're writing to the registry, but they're not. They think they're writing to the file system, but they're not. Now, sometimes you need to be able to break through that bubble because you really are doing something. Like, let's say you're writing the OneDrive app, right? I mean, it's got to actually listen to a real file system to make that work. But anyway, so that gap is there. You can punch through it. You're always in control because you're the developer. You know your enterprise better than we do. But on the whole, this is the way we want it to be. And so here's another example. We have a partner in Missouri, and they have 8,000 line of business applications, if you can imagine. They're a pretty big company. And so they have this matrix of these applications will run with these and these, but not these. You know what I mean? And it's very complicated because they have different changes to different things that just don't work together. Now, if everything was encapsulated inside some sort of virtualized container, the way we're talking about right now with Centennial, you wouldn't even need a matrix like that because this application and this application don't need to know each other really at all.
That's super nice.
It's pretty sweet. I think a lot of developers don't know it's there. They think Windows 10 UWP, that's a full rewrite, and I think full rewrite doesn't come out of our mouths, but like once in the blue moon, right? I mean, let's be honest, some apps do need a full rewrite.
I know I've written some that need some full rewrites, unfortunately. So tell us a little bit more about Project 10 you mentioned. What is it? What are some template files that people would like to use? And what are some of the sort of coding shortcuts that you're allowing us with those kind of templates? Yeah,
so Template 10 it's really templates, right? File new project inside Visual Studio with UWP today in Windows 10 is just blank. You don't get anything else, just blank, right?
I started one actually, and it was nothing.
Yeah, I mean, it's white. I mean, it's pretty, and you could change the theme, and it goes black.
The original Xbox is in there too, right? The little box with the X in it when you start.
Yeah.
I call it the original Xbox.
They added that to the...
My mom thinks it's funny, okay? Don't stop looking at your screen like it's a dumb joke, okay?
There's one solitary clap in the distance.
I know. So you were saying there's some things you can change too?
Oh, sure. Well, what it gives you is a full navigate. It's all the stuff, right? So the first thing you have to solve is navigation. Like, how do I go from one page to another? And more importantly, if I'm going to use a real pattern like MVVM, how am I going to handle navigation and make it MVVM friendly, where I'm passing parameters to the view model, not just the page? Things like that. All of that is a lot to wire up. Every developer is going to be able to do it because these are smart developers. They're all going to have some variation. Why not have some sort of consistency that just works? And so we have over 120 different community contributors in this repo. It's really amazing how active it is, and it is solid. Like so much goodness in Template 10 already. And so you can say File New Project now. You can still say blank, and it just says Hello World. It gives you a little bit more.
And the original Xbox, which I still think is a funny joke.
It is still the original Xbox.
Thank you.
Xbox.
Can you give me an example?
We put a 360 under it, and so we've rotated it 360 degrees.
Oh, right. So, I can tell that's actually funny because right.
Gosh.
Can you give me an example of a template that I would install and what it would do? I know that you said there's 120.
More practically, what people look for is file new hamburger menu, right? That's what they really want. They want a project, but they want to use like a mechanism that they already are familiar with. And then if you do this from blank, it is so much work. I mean, no kidding, so much work because nothing is provided out of the box right now. And so right now that means you're going to use the split view and you're just going to start building out all this hamburger business. And maybe it'll be full. Maybe you'll remember to make it accessible. Maybe you'll remember to handle all the different colors and high contrast. Maybe you'll remember to handle keyboard navigation. It's just a pain. And so what if somebody else wrote all of this for you.
Like this guy.
What if somebody else talked to the platform team to make sure I didn't skip any of the important stuff? And what if somebody else made it open source so the outside community is like, and I need to do this, and now it does, right? It is a super rich implementation.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I started UWP app, and there was literally nothing. And then I was like, I know I'm supposed to be like the cool kids and do MVVM.
Yeah.
And so I implemented my own iNotify property event.
Everybody does that.
And then I had to write a delegate command object, and I'm just like, it feels like I shouldn't have to write this.
Yeah. That's what I say too. You know, there's a lot of like very popular MVVM, like MVVM Lite, MVVM Across,
Prism.
you know, Prism. And it blows my mind that there's not a Microsoft MVVM, right? I mean, when you look at a framework of what MVVM really takes, it's like 3 files. You know, it's nothing. You need to advocate for this internally. You have the power and kind of the sway.
People laugh at me all the time.
When you talk, people listen.
When I talk, people laugh.
Yeah. That's what I meant to say.
Oh, right.
I get the L words.
And I feel like, look, I know the guy that works on Prism.
Brian Lagunas.
Yeah, smart guy. I mean, I'm sure and it's part of the foundation, .NET Foundation.
Yeah, it is.
I feel like I need to write it the first time to know I don't need to write this ever.
Yeah, that's kind of right.
And I liked writing my delegate command. I liked writing my implementation of iNotify property change, you know, and it was fun, but now I feel like I need to go to your stuff. Like, does your stuff have like MVVM stuff built in? Is it your own MVVM framework? Is there one for MVVM Lite, MVVM Cross? Is there one for Prism? Are those the kind of templates? Okay.
Yeah, so it has a little like baby MVVM implementation that hopes that you'll come in with MVVM Lite or Cross and replace it. But if you don't, then yeah, I can provide 3 files. It's not a big deal, right? That's the deal. I think in the future, if you were to look at the roadmap for a template 10, it'll be Prism. We're going to bring in Prism and have it as the default, and then you've got to intentionally make something else the default.
I remember when Prism came out for WinForms, man. And I was looking at that documentation, I was like,
yeah,
holy cow, there's a lot of stuff in there.
There's a lot of stuff. And you know what? Prism became like the umbrella for everything that Patterns and Practices was creating. And it was totally unapproachable, if you ask me, right?
I read a lot of the docs, man. There were the little triangle people and then the squares, and I was just like, I'm going to get this one day.
Yeah.
And I kind of did. Okay, so where can people find out more about you and the
But you
work
never
you're doing?
got it. It's where you were really going to go. Because I never fully got it. Because WPF and the thousands of moving parts and the enterprise library and the holy moly, there's a lot to it.
There's a
That's
lot
not
of
the
stuff.
same as what we were talking about, by the way.
No.
Just the same name.
Right.
Just the same name.
Yeah, it's the same name. And so tell us, where can people find out more about you and the stuff you're working on, and then also Template 10?
Thanks. Yeah. So jerrynixon.com, Nixon. Turns out a lot of people don't know how to spell Nixon.
Nixon?
Yeah, just like the president.
There's
if I go to dinner, it's always Nickson. I'm like, I've never met a human with that name.
Yeah, Nixon.
Yeah.
I thought there would be like the number 7 in that name somehow.
Nice. So
that
you're
was also not
you're that
funny.
guy.
I just want to let you know I'm not on my game today. Okay.
jerrynixon.com is where you find me.
Okay.
At Jerry Nixon's Twitter. Jerry Nixon all over the place, right? And then if you want to find out about Template 10, just go to jerrynixon.com. It's the link at the top.
Awesome. Well, it's always a pleasure to meet with you, my friend.
Thanks,
I know you
Seth.
have some. I know you make some videos that are.
Is this a left-handed shake?
I was doing the point like he does MVA stuff, right? Don't you?
Oh yeah.
Tell us about those videos, and you have some stuff on Channel 9. So you got to plug your stuff, man.
Oh yeah, great. So Microsoft Virtual Academy. That's basically Microsoft's Pluralsight, only it's all free. Tons of learning, not just Microsoft tooling, but also just stuff. Every developer should be on there looking to see if there's a course they can learn more about. You need to know about Node, need to Kickstarter for JavaScript, whatever it is, it's all on there as well. I have zillions of courses, honestly. Almost all of them are XAML related. Certainly almost all of them are UWP related. And I guess I do the C# Jumpstart for certification as well.
Awesome.
It's pretty
You're
great.
the man. Well, thanks so much for spending time with us. If you are watching live, he will be on later on today talking about the Jumpstart with some screenshots and hopefully some better jokes.
Oh yeah, I've got them all queued up.
I mean, from me.
You've written them all for me, so we'll see how they go down.
Sure. So we're gonna have a little break. We're gonna have someone else come on live. We're during the break here in Arizona for the Arizona sort of meetup with Scott Guthrie, who comes. There's gonna be an AMA with him later on. I think at 4 o'clock. Am I right? Who else do we have coming up, Scott?
Rob Bagby and Scott Guthrie.
Bob Bragby.
Rob Bagby, and then Scott Guthrie later on from 4 to 5. So make sure to stay tuned for that. And with that, we're going to go to a break. She's going to cut my audio, and we're going to go on a little break, and then we're going to have another guest on.